welcome everybody. This is a Monday night call. It's a series of just talks that we're doing on specific subjects within our line of products and the things that we do and how we operate. So the main culprits of why our cells break down, because again, when our cells break down and become dysfunctional, that's when the disease processes are allowed to proliferate. The main challenges at the cellular level, number one, our cells get attacked by pathogens. Those are things like bacteria, viruses, fungi like mold. And of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic right now where we see the effects of how do viruses attack our cells. We're seeing that firsthand right now. Number two challenge at the cellular level is a thing called chronic inflammation. It absolutely destroys the integrity of our cells. Number three, oxidation. That is our oxidative stress. That is when there's too many toxins in our body, too many toxins in our cells for our cells to appropriately deal with. And we fall under what is called oxidative stress, which again, breaks down, tears down the integrity of the health of the cell. And then of course, all of those things lead to a dysfunctional immune responses. And all of a sudden, you've got a dysfunctional immune system that is actually on a full-time alert, full-time attack mode. And we'll talk about what that does to cellular health too. But tonight, specifically, we're going to talk about this issue of inflammation. You know, Danny Morgan and I did a presentation a few weeks ago where we talked about stress and the impacts of stress. And one of the things that stress does is it causes inflammation at the cellular level. And joining me on the call tonight is my co-host, my good friend, Ann Smith. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Ann Smith to the call. Hi, Ann.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's just, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you, because when you hear inflammation, inflammation isn't actually always a bad thing. Inflammation is a very good thing in certain situations. Like when you see this slide in front of you, when you have acute inflammation, you want that inflammatory response to be happening within the body. If you're in a traumatic injury, whether it's an accident on a bike, a car accident, whatever, you get bumps and bruises, you want that inflammatory response to be happening. Certainly if you have any bruises or cuts or lacerations or things like that, infections, chemical irritants, you want that acute inflammatory response to be happening within the body. So inflammation in of itself has a very profound impact on the body and a very important need for its proper functioning. But the problem is that when we slide over to the right side of the page is into the chronic inflammation, when that doesn't shut off, or when what we're going to learn about this evening is more about different things that can cause this chronic inflammation. Even if you have that acute problem and it doesn't shut off, that's one way of getting into that chronic inflammatory response in the body that's hard for the body to deal with. But there's other lifestyle factors, other things that we do on a daily basis that just cause this chronic inflammation to start within our body. And here's one of the greatest thing that I really learned that I've carried with me in my life, because in my undergraduate degree was more about exercise and performance and how could you go faster, stronger, recover better, all of those types of things. Many healing type modalities, chiropractic being one of them, really take and have a different perspective of the body. It's actually quite gentler. It's recognizing that the body is a phenomenal healing. It knows how to heal itself. If you put it in the right environment, it knows what to do. And to really train people on becoming more in tune to what's kind of actually even going on within your body and more aware of that. Because what happens when you look at a dis-ease or even a disease process, we're such a symptom-based society. If something hurts, we take care of it. But if it's not hurting, we kind of just forget about it and go along with our daily lives. But what's interesting, and then all of a sudden, certainly, like, oh, I just picked up something and I pulled my back, I hurt my back because I lifted this. Well, no, the problem had been there for quite some time. You just kind of brought it over the tipping edge that it actually caused the symptoms to happen such that you needed to take care of it. But in a dis-ease process, the symptoms are the last thing to show up in that process. And they're the first thing actually as the healing begins to happen with the body for it to go away. So often people don't give their body long enough period to recover from whatever they've injured themselves from. So that chronic inflammation that's happening within their body, I really like to talk to people about not becoming symptom-based. Don't wait until you have symptoms to think that you need to take care of yourself or you need to do something. Become more, do health different based. What can I do today to support my health and well-being? Because when you have that chronic inflammation, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit more detail, chronic inflammation today has been linked to all of the different diseases that you see on your screen right there from front of the Time magazine. This was all, I think even more than a decade ago that this came out, calling it the secret killer, and how inflammation has been linked to heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and various types of conditions that people suffer from. Because inflammation, if you think of it, that acute inflammatory response, yes, there's heat, there's pain, there's a burning sensation that happens. That's all a normal response within that acute inflammatory response. But when it doesn't shut off, or we live a life that promotes chronic inflammation, it really is like a fire that burns with day. And I'll use a fable, an analogy, but the frog put in the boiling pot or put in the pot of water. And when it's put in a hotter water, the frog jumps out. When it's hot and uncomfortable, kind of like that acute inflammatory response, we take action immediately. But when the frog is put into a pot of cool water and it's gradually raised, the temperature's raised, the frog doesn't jump out. It gradually adapts to that raising temperature to the point where it boils, and then the frog dies. And if you think of that, this same sort of similar type of an analogy is happening within the body with the chronic inflammation. And why Time magazine called it the silent killer, because you don't feel it. It's just so gradual. And then as it builds and builds within your body, and we attribute it to age, I'm just feeling it a little bit more in my body. My digestion may not be working well. My energy may not be what it used to be. My clarity of thought may not be what it used to be. And we attribute it to just sort of those types of things. And I'm not saying that natural aging doesn't happen in the body. It does. But it can happen at such a more accelerated rate when we have this chronic inflammation happening within the body. And so we come into these 6 different lifestyle factors that promote, this is actually things that we do that promote that kind of water raising, that temperature raising within our body, and that we're not even aware of it. And so you see the 6 factors there. Certainly foods that are high in sugar, high in the fast sugar, that causes inflammation within the body, causes blood sugar imbalances, but definitely leads to more of that chronic inflammatory response within the body. Fatty acid imbalance. We're certainly a society that takes in far more omega-6 than omega-3s, and we don't have that proper 2-to-1 type ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. And that imbalance itself also triggers that chronic type inflammatory response. Again, we're not going to feel it. This just gradually builds over time. Nutrient deficiencies, whether it's vitamin D, magnesium, and certainly the phytonutrients, because we're not a type of a standard American diet that is high in phytonutrients. We don't eat a lot of fresh vegetables and the leafy greens and things like that, and some nice deep red vegetables as well. Physical inactivity. We all know that it's beneficial for our health, but have you ever thought about physical activity actually supporting the body's inflammatory response? Because it does. It helps to not only increase insulin sensitivity, and it also helps to reduce inflammation in the body. Fat cells, as we increase and have more adipose tissue in the body, that triggers that chronic inflammatory response. It's not the acute one when you want that happening. It's just this subtle little chronic inflammation that goes on within the body. And then you look at things like toxin exposure, you know, that we're just exposed to different things, whether it's in the air, in the water that we drink, in the things, the personal products that we put on our bodies, our face that we use, the things that we wash clothes in, all of those different types of toxin exposures have been shown to also kind of trigger that chronic inflammatory response. And then the final one there that Sam mentioned, that he and Danny spoke about recently, but just how stress impacts that inflammatory response, and certainly poor sleep, and a lot of those two go hand in hand.
Yeah, so the definition of cellular inflammation is increased activity of the gene transcription factor known as nuclear factor kappa B. That's that NF-κB. It's in every cell, and it activates the cell's inflammatory responses to different stimuli. And so this is the key of why your cells become inflamed, that one gene. And I'm going to talk to you about how it gets activated. But when it is activated and inflammation is released in the cell, the problem is it starts destroying the structure of the cell. So in other words, it will destroy the lipid structure of the cell lining itself. It will attack the mitochondria. You know, that's the energy producing furnace inside the cell that makes ATP and creates energy. And when you start attacking the mitochondria, they now call all these inflammatory diseases mitochondrial diseases. Because when your mitochondria gets destroyed or defective and you lose the ability to create energy, it is time for that cell to die. And if the cell doesn't die, that is the first stage of cancer development within a cell. So all this is very critical. But there's that one gene right there in the center, that NF-κB. Okay, so what influences that? First of all, you see that thing that says toll-like receptor? That's where outside forces outside the cell, like bacteria or fungi or viruses, they attach to those toll-like receptors and actually enter the cell. That triggers that response, of course. Then you see cytokine receptors on the bottom. That's if your immune system is already overacting, it's releasing pro-inflammatory cytokines that do what? That turn on that gene. And as Ann said, when you have an imbalance in essential fatty acids, too many omega-6s, that's what that AA is. That also triggers that gene. In fact, essential fatty acids can have a more modulating effect on that gene than anything else. But then you also have toxins inside the cell. We talked about that just a minute ago, that rate of oxidative stress, that also causes that gene to be activated. When a stress hormone attaches to the cell, which is what hormones do, it sends a signal that also turns on that gene. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that turn on that gene. And one of the things about turning on that gene is that it activates an enzyme that is called COX-2. You see that on the very right. COX-2 is what causes the actual inflammation to occur. Some of you may be familiar with the pharmaceutical approach to reducing inflammation in your body. They're called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And the most popular were things like Vioxx, cell-a-brate, Bextra. What do? They only have one mechanism of action. They inhibit COX-2 enzyme from converting into pro-inflammatory cytokines. And the problem with those is that they're toxic. So I just mentioned Vioxx. Vioxx was actually taken off the market several years ago because over 50,000 people that took it died of heart disease. So the good news about all of this is it can all be influenced through dietary intervention and through lifestyle changes, just like Ann said. And so what is the best way to defend ourselves? How can we go over and beyond what is just normal lifestyle? Well, what you can do is you can turn to nature. And in nature, you find molecules that do a better job of what we're talking about than anything else that exists on the planet. And so I'm going to talk to you about one of those discoveries tonight. It started with the fact that Cornell University did a study looking at antioxidant vegetables. What they were saying is, gosh, there's so much data on testing fruits and vegetables in test tubes. And of course, everybody had their list of the top anti-inflammatory foods, mainly green leafy vegetables, right? You've heard that. That's probably at the top of everybody's list. But Cornell said it's something different happens though when you actually eat that food. And so why don't we look at what food has the most powerful effect, antioxidant effect on our cells by eating. And so what they found is that it was the beet that actually turned out to be number one. It beat out all the rest. It beat out green leafy vegetables. It beat out all of these things. So a company that is called Futureceuticals said, well, that's interesting because a lot of times these antioxidants, particularly a certain class of them that are called polyphenols, have a dual effect. They not only reduce oxidative stress, they reduce inflammation. You might be familiar with the herb turmeric. It's a root, and its active ingredient, curcumin. That's probably the best known anti-inflammatory substance. It's been researched forever. In Ayurvedic medicine, that is the primary anti-inflammatory molecule. Curcumin is a pigment. It makes the turmeric plant turn yellow, and it's a polyphenol. And it has an antioxidant effect, but it has a very strong anti-inflammatory. And so the guys at Futureceuticals says the active ingredient in the beet is called a betaline. It's a polyphenol. It's a pigment. It's what makes the beet red. Maybe it would have the same type of or similar type of anti-inflammatory response. We already know how effective it is as an antioxidant. There was only one problem, and that's that the polyphenols in the beet, these betalains, are attached to sugar. So they're glycinated in the beet, which means they're bound to sugar. So what's the problem with that? Well, sugar is a pro-inflammatory substance. And so when you get a beetroot powder extract on the market today, turn to the back to the panel, nutritional fact panel, and what you'll see is about 70% of all the calories in that product are sugar. And so they said, well, if we're going to test this for its ability to lower the biomarkers of inflammation, we're definitely going to need to get rid of the sugar. So they filed a patent on a process that first of all extracted the betalains and then broke the bonds of those sugars from the betalains. And what they ended up with are these purified betalains from beetroot. Pretty remarkable technology. And then what they did is they did a research project where they actually looked at how significantly could we reduce these biomarkers that are expressed in the body and in the cells. And so they did their own study, and it was called The Influence of Betalain-Rich Extract on the Reduction of Discomfort Associated with Osteoarthritis. And of course, this is not a drug effect. What they were looking for is just the biomarkers of inflammation. In other words, did people actually feel better? And could you validate the efficacy of that intervention against these biomarkers? And that's what this test showed. And it, if you can't read the text necessarily, but the very bottom line is really the bottom line. And it said that after just 10 days of this intervention, they lowered the most appropriate biomarkers of inflammation by 48%. Guys, there is nothing like that. I mean, turmeric has never tested like that. Curcumin has never achieved that level of biomarker reduction. So this is really one-of-a-kind technology out there.
Lead scientist on this, Stavomir Webernecki, was the final name in the listing there, along with ZB, which we call him, I can't pronounce his last name. ZB works out of Chicago with Futureceuticals. But they hired the world leading authority on betalain research. He's from Poland, Stavomir Webernecki, to conduct and to research this. And it took them years to develop the technology to do what Sam mentioned of how to isolate that betalain from the beet. And it's a cold water extraction methodology. It's a patented process. But the key things there, exactly in the slides that Sam was showing about the simplifying the inflammation that didn't seem all that simple, but those biomarkers, those key components of inflammation were reduced by using this simple capsule of this betalain extract. And again, you're not going to find this anywhere else in terms of what it does. So the subjects that were tested were men in their, I actually saw the subjects and what they filled out and their ages and all of that, their names were eliminated, but in their 50s and 60s that had osteoarthritis affiliated with their knee. And again, after 10 days, the key inflammatory markers dropped. And the other significant aspect with this, using the McGill Energy Score Index, they found their perceived, so it's a subjective measure, but when your inflammation drops in the body, subjective feelings of energy also increase. So they found an increase of up to 120% in these subjects who had increased inflammatory markers. Their energy, perceived levels of energy also increased according to the McGill Energy Score Index, which is also significant. So, and further research has also been done with this, looking at athletes, because athletes put themselves through a tremendous amount of stress and helping from both performance and recovery. So when you look at this next slide that we'll go to, well, this actually, some of you may have seen this image in some of our marketing material, but it was with a massage therapist that I was working with when this product was first introduced. Again, there's always in Western medicine more skepticism linked, although it's growing in awareness and understanding from nutrition and how nutrition impacts the body. And Sam talked about turmeric and the Ayurvedic medicine, and I love the Ayurvedic proverb, when the diet is wrong, medicine is of no use, meaning the body can't even really fully function. When the diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. But when the diet is right, when the diet is correct, medicine is of no need. So and even Hippocrates of the modern medicine, let food be thy medicine and medicine be by food. But this particular image here is what's called thermographic imaging. So taking pictures of heat differentials on the surface of the skin. This was a massage therapist that obviously, like many healthcare professionals, you're kind of skeptical. You're approached with so many different products and things out there, and you're wondering what's real. And so I really appreciated that this massage therapist was willing to evaluate this. And she actually, in the clinic that she was working in, had thermographic imaging capabilities, testing capabilities within her clinic. And so this particular patient that was in actually was a cabinet maker worker and had some overuse injuries with his wrist. So he came in to see her because his wrist was sore, was chronically bothering him. And she was testing out this product. And so she did some thermographic imaging. We do also have some of his wrist, but this one is really significant, of his back. So he did not come in complaining of back pain. He came in complaining that his wrist was hurting, not his back. But when you look at, again, obviously red shows increased heat, increased inflammation, increased tension within the body, both in the upper portion of the back and in the lower cervicals, upper thoracic, and then down into the lumbar area that you'll see the redness in there. And then you look at after. Now, so she wasn't doing her massage. This was not even taking the massage into effect. She just was evaluating the limitless product that we'll momentarily talk about. But you'll see afterwards, this was just hours after taking that particular product. She was blown away by the results of seeing the difference. But here's the key component that I want people listening to be aware of. The patient, the person, the gentleman didn't feel a difference. He didn't feel anything. He didn't even know his back was aware that his back looked like that. Because so often, although the risk didn't respond within hours, you started to see the impact of diminishing that inflammation within the body. And so I encourage people not to, when they're utilizing even all of these products, when you're dealing with food-based products, let them incorporate into your system. And just because you're not seeing a result immediately within the hours, you can see that this is evidence that something is working within his body and showing. And he did see an improvement also even in his wrist over time with this. But one of the things that we can do, I've been doing this now for probably a decade almost that we came out with this product. But I pop one of these capsules into my body. I have a glass of water in the morning with my Limitless and the other products that I take in the morning. They're won't get into all of those details, but definitely the Limitless one. And the first thing in the morning on that empty stomach is more recommended, so that you're not consuming it with food, this one, so that you get the effect of the pure betalain not being impacted, especially with perhaps any other carbohydrates or sugars that you may have in your body at that time. So first thing in the morning is awesome, one capsule. And then what Sam has done to it, and where this particular talk isn't based on what Ace Mannan does to the body, but now he's added Ace Mannan to it. So this is just a rock star product that I just really encourage people to, give it a try. See what this is going to do for your body. I know it's going to make a difference in helping your body just support that chronic inflammation because of the lifestyles that we all lead, the stress and what have you. It's a simple thing to incorporate into your life to help your body do what it wants to do.
Guys, just in review tonight, we know that one of the most devastating things that happens at the cellular level is chronic inflammation. And it is triggered by that gene. And one of the few things that actually inhibits that gene from being activated are these betalains. There's a few things in diet that can do it, but betalains are one of the most profound. That's why the biomarkers of inflammation are reduced. It not only attacks from the gene level, it goes all the way downstream and deals with COX-2 and everything else. The story on inflammation tonight, it's critical. It's important that we know about it. As Dan said, you don't feel it, but it's there. And if you don't deal with it, you wake up one day with a clinical event, and that's what we're trying to inhibit through this intervention. So thanks everybody for being on the call. Thanks, Ann. Good seeing you.
Yeah, great to be here with everyone. Good night.